So like, I'll take a look at, especially coming in, like if a site has existed for a while, there's probably something in there that's not bad, right? Like it might have some presence already. It might have some visibility. Well, what can we do to bump that up? So that's almost one of the first things I always do is like, what is the existing content? Maybe it's like, and especially if it's like organic, from an organic perspective, like what can we do to move it up a few positions to get it where it's going to start seeing traffic? I think that's such an easy thing to do. And people often overlook it. It's like, I would do that for all of my clients.
Welcome back to Content in the Kitchen, where we gather around the kitchen and chat about content marketing. In today's episode, we're exploring how to scale your content with limited resources, featuring a very special guest. Casie's a seasoned content marketer bringing 18 years of experience that has significantly influenced the content marketing landscape. Known for her contributions to over 100 events and numerous publications, Casie's emotionally intelligent leadership has motivated coworkers and partners alike, allowing her to build high-performing teams and foster long-term relationships, all within the content space. So grab your favorite cup and let's dive into the conversation with Casie. Let's start things off with the most important question, at least in my opinion, is what is your go-to dish to cook? What do you like to cook in the kitchen?
So when you asked me this, I was like, okay, I have to tell this story. So there's this Alton Brown fish taco recipe that I have loved for years. And what I like about it is like it has tequila, cilantro, like cumin, like all these like really good things. But the reason I tell it is I had it bookmarked on my browser for years. So I would get on, and especially like with the new computers like Chrome, you just sign in and it brings all your bookmarks in. So I would be like sharing my screen in client meetings or like sound pictures, and people would be like, "Fish tacos, huh?" Like, okay, you have to try this recipe. It's so good.
Then you can just pop over to that tab and be like, okay, check out the recipe.
Exactly. See, I'll just send it to you.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. I work with a lot of food bloggers, so they would probably just be like, oh, that's just another client site. But in your case, it would definitely be a little bit like, hungry?
Yeah. Just genuinely like fish tacos.
Same. 100% same. As a San Diego, 100% same.
Yeah, you guys have them a little better there than here. So.
I won't disagree with you there, but okay, diving into, from fish tacos to content marketing things, I really want to start things off with understanding how you tackle the big, huge, gigantic task of scaling content when time and resources are super limited. You've come from agency background, now in startup environments, so you've definitely experienced the need to scale content and not having a whole workhorse behind you to help do that, or even budget. So what's your go-to process usually look like once it's time to start scaling?
Yeah, well, I'd like to think back on this, when I think about like scaling content, like working at an agency, like I was really spoiled, at least the last few years, right? Because as the agency grows bigger, you have more resources. But, depending on client budgets, I can think of a client that came in and said, look, we're trying to get acquired in the next 18 months and we have like zero search visibility. So what are we going to do? And you're like, oh, wow, like, okay, this is different, right? So like I'm pitching them, you need like at least 10 assets a week and you need to be doing this. Well, what does that look like? And then, now back in the startup world, like you're thinking the same thing. It's like, I'm used to these SEO programs where, you know what, if it takes 3 to 6 months to start seeing results, like, great. No, like we need to see results now. And you're working with a much smaller team. So, excuse me, I think one of the things that I've really relied on has been tools. I think back to, I remember giving a presentation years ago about like how to, how to go through the search results and create yourself an outline for a blog post. And then SEMrush came out with like their outline, content template outline. And I was like, oh, you just saved me like hours of work, right? So, tools like that really help you think about like, what do I need? They'll show you like the content gaps. And then honestly, like GPT and Bard have been game changers for me. I know that, like, especially as a content marketer where like the quality of content is near and dear to my heart. It took me a little while to get on board because I was like, oh, man, like just putting out junk. Like, I don't want to be a part of that. But when you really start thinking about like, how do I scale? Like, it gives you the tools. So like going back to that outline, okay, like I don't have to spend hours like trying to create an outline, right? Or like it'll tell me like, you can just say, hey, I'm trying to rank for this particular term. What do I need? Give me the headings and subheadings I need to show up in the search results. Or like, what do I need to show up in the featured snippet? That's done for me. Now, I'm not saying that I'm using it to write all my content. Like, totally, it's not there, right? It's not there, but the helpfulness of it, like, even if it just creates me a paragraph that I can then go modify and put in my voice, like the time saver of it has been absolutely enormous. And so I think like really, as I go back to like that side of content, or I know you're the same way where it's like, we want to create quality content that resonates with people, that's creative, that people like it's that balance of like, how do I utilize the tools that I have to create this content faster? And like, here's just a couple of examples. Like I'm thinking about like all the things that I used to do or still do really, but like, I used to tell clients that like, take a look at your help forum, right? Take a look at your support forums because people are asking questions there. So you can do that. Like, and I used to have clients where like their support forums outranked their regular site. And so we would then go take that and build it into like a blog or an article or something that could live on the primary site. Now you can throw that into GPT, right? Just take that text, throw it in GPT, tell it to put it in a different format, like how you want it for a blog, for this tone, matches your brand voice, and you can save so much time on that. Same thing with like webinars. I used to give this example because webinars are like, I have such a love-hate relationship with them because actually it used to drive me crazy. Like we would put out, like my clients would come up with a webinar, right? And then like, we'd send out 20 emails about it and then that was the end of it. But I had other clients where like we would take that webinar and we would turn it into a blog post and we would take the videos and create landing pages for them. Well, now you can do that a lot easier because like if you're doing them on Zoom, it records your most webinar platforms give you the transcript.
Yes.
Same thing. Throw it into Bard, throw it into GPT, and it parses that for you. So you're not sitting there trying to type it out or trying to make sense of what's happening. And it's just such a time saver. Same thing with like social updates. Like having to create social updates for your site. Like just the other day, I was like, all right, well, like I need like 10 Twitter updates. Like we have an event, right? We have this big event coming up. I need 10 Twitter updates. I need a LinkedIn update. I just gave GPT the link and said, I need a Twitter update. I need it to follow these best practices. I want it to have this tone. Give me 10 updates. And now I have that. And like, I'm going to modify them. But again, like the time savings is just immense for like 3 things that like I can just think of off the top of my head.
Totally. I mean, that you can really come up with so many other content ideas by being able to take more of the admin processes out and really then scale your content. Curious with tools. I'm literally going through this right now with building out a bunch of SEO content briefs, content outlines, and utilizing different tools and the data from different tools. And it's like one tool says X, Y, and Z should be the heading structure. Another tool says something totally different. They're both supposedly getting the data from the top X amount of ranking content. So how are you going through and relying on these tools and trusting that, okay, this tool, I'm confident with the data that it puts out, that I can base a whole strategy off of this?
I'm not. We're done. Now, I mean, look, with anything, like we have always said this as content marketers, as digital marketers, we have always said like, you can't put 100% reliance on the tools, right? It goes back to like, what is your experience and what do you know? Because a lot of times, like what a tool will give you is like the same thing that 20 other people have said, right? And so it gives you the sense of, you put it into the search results to see, okay, like what else is out there around this? Okay, well, I don't want to use this exact title because there's like 5 other posts that say the same thing. But then there's tools like CoSchedule has their headline analyzer, HubSpot has a headline analyzer. There's a bunch of things that you can then put it in and it'll give you some more unique things. So it's 100% like your expertise combined with what those tools are telling you. So, but it's still to me a time saver because I didn't have to think of it from scratch. And I think that's the key, right? Like, can't tell you, like, I've come up, like, I was just doing a post right now and I'm like, this headline is terrible. Like, I hate, like, I just, this headline. I don't like it. I threw it into the CoSchedule tool and it gave me like 4 other options that I was like, yeah, these are much better, right? And that alone just saved me like a headache of spending 20 minutes trying to determine what's a better title.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you're kind of using a combination of tools. And I find this very frequently that one tool will do really great in one thing, even though it offers 50, they really kill it at this one thing. And so it does come down to having these like mini baseline subscriptions to multiple tools when you're trying to streamline your content strategy and really scale things. Have you found any tools that you're like, okay, this I will always use no matter what for an element of my content strategy?
Yeah. I mean, I'm such a huge SEMrush fan, have been for years. I just love like what their like content marketing tools specifically do. Whether it's like giving you ideas, whether even just like, I was looking at their like just the keywords the other day and I was looking at something and I was like, oh gosh, they even have just like the themes now, right? They have the questions that are being asked and everything's all in one place. Like it's kind of, and again, it could just be because it's been one of my default tools for so long, but like it never lets me down. I just think it's so good. And I've just, again, like I've had a lot of experience with it, but I'm always trying to do new things. Like I've been checking out just like different AI tools as well lately, like just testing out like Copy AI, Jasper AI, Writer, like what are the capabilities? Because again, just going back to that idea of scaling, I don't trust a tool like GPT to write content for me, right? Like I just don't. But especially like content that's specific to my audience, specific to my product, like they don't know. But with some of these other tools, they seem to be a bit better. And like, again, like the thing I've just found with AI is like what you put into it is what you get out of it. So some of these, like we're just kind of testing some of those to see like if I can input a lot of information, what does it give me? So, and I've been finding some decent results. I mean, nothing's amazing yet, but again, just thinking about how do we save time, right? How do we save time without sacrificing the content?
Yeah. And that's really the goal at the end of the day. Something that you mentioned in the beginning is, coming into a company who's maybe trying to go public and they need or be bought out and they need to really scale and really quick. They don't have the 6 months. So you mentioned, okay, let's get 10 blog posts going. Maybe we're just throwing out that number, but what do you do in those situations? Because I'm sure a lot of listeners are in those shoes pretty regularly to where they're starting from scratch. They have deadlines that are so not realistic for KPIs, but they need to figure it out. So do you have kind of like a recipe to success for starting off?
Yeah. So I'll just go back to that client example because they were actually in like the custom printing business, which is so unbelievably competitive. So you're like, all right, well, we're talking about like 10 blog posts. Like that's not going to cut it. That's just a piece. But what we did find is, all right, well, where is their presence and where are the opportunities? That was the key. So in this instance, it was, let's look at the industries because we might not be able to rank for custom stickers, but we might be able to rank for custom brewery stickers, custom restaurant stickers, whatever that is. So, and build up to that broader term. And that was the strategy we took and it worked. I mean, we really pushed. That also meant like updating product pages, right? Expanding product pages. Like they had great, I mean, they were on Shopify. Shopify's super easy to use, super easy to build out new things, new capabilities. So just being able to add new things to like product pages on top of building out this expansive like article content. We started doing like case studies as well. With like, they would send an email to their customers and just say, hey, are you interested in a case study? We're interested in being featured on the site. And a lot of people were, which is kind of shocking because I feel like the opposite is often true with case studies where people are like, I don't really want to talk about you.
Don't put my name on anything.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, just finding the gap, that is always the key, is like, what is the gap and what are the opportunities? And so like same thing, like I'll just use like what we're doing at Customers AI, right? Like we're targeting, like we're a visitor identification platform. There's not really all that much content out there about it. So like, what are the use cases? What are people talking about? Like we've almost had to look at what are the problems people are facing versus just the term, right? So you have to think about, this isn't just about the keywords themselves, but what are the issues that people are challenged with, and like, how do we solve those? So it's not just blog posts or articles. Like I said, it's like we're creating features pages and case studies and things that kind of tackle the problems versus just like, we have to get this blog content out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, at that point, you're really working with a lot of different stakeholders, especially, product pages. Now you're working with the product team. You're definitely working with sales team. When you're working with that many different people and you need to get content out fast, do you have any strategies for how to communicate what the content needs are and how important it is to update those product pages? Because I mean, other stakeholders are just as busy as you are. So it's kind of hard to show that value prop of like, this really needs to be priority if we want to succeed.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about being in a smaller organization is you can just do it. So like, I will just Slack our product lead and be like, hey, can you tell me what this needs to say, right? Or like, but going back, like thinking more strategically, we do actually have like a bi-weekly check-in. And this is something when I worked in-house, I worked at a company called Grasshopper many years ago. And I've talked about this because I think it was so brilliant, is that we had weekly calls with customer support and weekly calls with like our sales team, because like, you don't get that information otherwise, right? Especially on the marketing team. Like all marketers want to know is, what are customers asking, right? Like what do people want? And like CS and sales, they know. So it's like you almost kind of have to force their hand. And I get, to your point, like everyone has time, everyone's busy, like not everybody has time, but sometimes it's just forcing it. And a lot of times it has to come from the top down, right? So like, that's one of the challenges in marketing. Like, there might be like a COO and they're focused on product and they're focused on sales, but like marketing can kind of be left to the side. So you almost have to get that buy-in to set that up. But once you build that relationship, like I think it's pretty easy. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm just like, hey, what do we need here? And then they're like, great, just go do it.
Yeah, just go execute. I absolutely love that you mentioned like the customer success teams, because I preach that so much. Even if you're at an agency and working with a client and trying to get a hold of their customer success teams, like it is so important to have that touch point on a regular basis to figure out, what are customers loving? What are they hating? What are their hesitations? Why aren't they going through with us? And so many times CS knows who our real competitors are.
Yep.
We can go to GA and we can go to SEMrush and be like, all right, who's our organic competitors? But CS knows like, oh, well, customer dropped to this company's name and this is where they're really going. So it's like, oh, okay, let's create content to kind of tackle that and squeeze into that niche then.
Exactly. I mean, the other thing too, I'd say is like, when it comes to like product and sales, I have found just in general, and even just like execs, like show them what your competitors are doing. And that was always a big thing. Like when I was at the agency, of like, if your client's like hesitant to do something, it's like, well, here are the 3 things your competitors are doing. Here's what they're saying, and here's how they're doing it. So I think we should be doing this. And the buy-in is a lot easier. And you can
totally. That makes a lot of sense, especially when you can see the finished
shiny, polished deliverable that's doing for them and trying to figure out how to implement that. That really does kind of like bring up the question of prioritizing content, because yes, okay, you need a bunch of blog posts to support things. You need sales collateral content. How do you approach like topic ideation in general when you're trying to scale content and figure out, all right, let's deal with these topics right away. Let's build out some pillar content. Like, what does that look like for you?
So I kind of try to break it down into like quick wins, long term, and then that middle of the road. So like I'll take a look at, especially coming in, like if a site has existed for a while, there's probably something in there that's not bad, right? Like it might have some presence already. It might have some visibility. Well, what can we do to bump that up? So that's almost one of the first things I always do is like, what is the existing content? Maybe it's like, and especially if it's like organic, from an organic perspective, like what can we do to move it up a few positions to get it where it's going to start seeing traffic? I think that's such an easy thing to do, and people often overlook it. It's like, I would do that for all of my clients. It was just like a whole refresh strategy of like, you have these 3 posts that basically say the same thing. Let's combine them into a bigger post that's going to do something, right? Like, let's use a URL that already has the best visibility. Let's build something there. And same thing, like, we have some older posts that do well, and it's just updating them and making them more comprehensive so they're going to show up. So that's the first piece. The other piece is like, and I've made this mistake, and I think it's learning. I just made this mistake. I was like, all right, like I got to start creating content for SEO. But then it's like, you know what? Like that's not getting us sales right now. What is getting us sales is this content about our integrations that are then being sent via email to our customers or prospects. That's resonating with them. Okay, great. So let's make sure we have that built into into our editorial calendar. And then it's like, okay, we also have like an influencer strategy, right? We're trying to reach these people. So how do I create things that are going to reach them? Well, let's make sure that we're creating social updates that tag them in it. So it really is like, it's kind of, for me, it's always been like a test and learn. But you're exactly right. It's like, you have to know the goals of the organization to prioritize it, because it's very easy to just be like, yeah, we're going to start creating this content. But like, like when you're on the agency side, like clients want to know, what am I seeing, right? What are the results?
Yeah.
So you have to have something that you can show pretty quickly. And I think that's where like, all right, how can we get this quick win? So maybe it's like that gap that I mentioned where like, maybe there's something that doesn't exist that you can fill that gap, or just updating something that you already have to make it better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How are you going in and identifying that something doesn't exist and we need this? I mean, Content Gap Tool and SEMrush will totally tell you from a competitor angle, but how are you really?
Yeah. So a lot of times, like when I come into like whether it was a new client or a new business, whatever, I'm just doing a general analysis of what do we have, right? And then I'm also looking at what are our keyword targets, and then mapping what we have. So I have a whole sheet of, here are our 50 primary keywords that are our targets, and here is the content that we have, and here are all the places we don't have content for it, right? So it's kind of that twofold strategy of like, I'm an SEO at heart. What am I going to say?
Yeah. Screaming SEO. I love I never actually like content path, but yeah, I see you.
I know. Well, because and honestly, it just comes from the fact that when I started doing SEO, you had to build content. And then I was like, well, I really love content. But like, then it was, well, your content has to show results. So how am I showing results? It's just all tied together.
Totally. It really is. I love when like, as a content marketer, you get bucketed into the SEO things. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we do need optimization. That is like a huge piece to the content puzzle.
Yeah.
Not like old days where printed and people will read it. No, not so much. Right. Yeah, it's definitely changed. You mentioned that, different clients have different metrics. Some metrics you can see right away in terms of success. Yeah. I'm always really curious to hear from a content marketer or an SEO, whatever hat you want to put on, what metrics you track first, regardless of if it's for a client or in-house, like you personally know that this is an important metric?
Yeah. So it's tricky because revenue and leads were always the primary KPI, right? And still are, right? Like sales and leads. The challenge with content is you might have top of the funnel content that it's not going to drive you those immediate sales and leads. So in that case, we might look at organic traffic. That's always like a top one, right? Is it driving traffic? And not even organic, like is there something that's resonating on social, right? There's your different channels. So that's always just kind of been one, is like the traffic itself. Again, it breaks down to the type of content as well. So like, let's use like, if we were going to do like a white paper, all right, well, what we're looking for is like form fills, right? Like, or like leads, right? From that. So that might be the metric. Whereas like, yes, this top of the funnel blog post, like we're bringing in traffic. And then eventually what we might see are like leads down the funnel. That might be like the first touch. So it's going to depend on the content itself. But yeah, I think that traffic, like that always kind of showed me like, okay, this is starting to resonate, right? This is starting to work. We're starting to see things from it. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to revenue.
Yes. And I mean, that really does look different from project to project or client to client, what the revenue figures are and how long that sales funnel can be with content. It's always really tricky to measure. And I feel like that's like the biggest question that I always get asked is, how can you really put a success metric on this? And, sometimes it doesn't look like a revenue success metric. Sometimes it's a traffic metric, or we don't birds. And so it's always really important to kind of clarify what content can do and what content can't do, especially as we're trying to scale.
I'm sorry. No, I just want to say like a perfect example of this is like I had a client in the marketing technology space, and we had built all these like very top of the funnel, like kind of just pillar pages is what you'd call them. And they ranked outrageously and they brought in so much traffic. And so the client was like, well, that's great, but like, this is really top of the funnel. It's not doing anything for me. And so what we ended up doing was putting like banners, right? Like just putting CTAs throughout the content that took people to like a relevant white paper or ebook or webinar or something to push them into the next stage of the funnel. Well, then as we start digging in, come to find out these pages end up being the top source of leads for those people, right? So like the top source of leads because they then went and filled out a form or downloaded that thing, but they came in originally on those top of the funnel pieces. So it was much easier to say, see, these are doing something.
Yeah, this is truly working, and you can, those are metrics that are tangible, and you can actually track that with your journey as well, and also figure out what holes to fit there. If they get to stage 3 and then drop out in the funnel, then it's kind of one of those clear indicators. Right. Oh, let's create another supporting piece of content right here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the biggest things with scaling content that I've done in the past that's worked really well is repurposing content and identifying, what your strong wins are and then turning those into 50 different kinds of pieces in different ways. You mentioned doing a version of that using AI. Really curious to hear what your repurposing content strategy looks like when you're scaling for companies.
Yeah. One thing that's been interesting specifically at Customers AI is that like Larry Kim is our CEO. And so he has this really big he's very prominent in social media. Yes. So you can see pretty quickly like what messages are resonating. So he might post something about a specific topic that really resonates with the audience. And especially like that advertiser audience is our market. And so then we're like, okay, this works. Now we're turning that into like a content asset on the site. So, or it's like, hey, let's do a webinar on this because we got so much interest in this. And so it's almost like the opposite of what you would think, right? A lot of times you're creating content and then pushing it out on social. That's kind of your repurposing of like, all right, I'm going to take this piece and put it on. It's kind of been the opposite. It's like, okay, this message is resonating. Let's turn that into a webinar. Let's turn that into a blog post. The webinars that and again, like I mentioned this earlier, but like, I love, using webinars because you put a lot of time into them. The content is often just like so good. And if you have other people, it's such a great way to get your content shared, your name out there. So like taking a webinar and then turning it into a blog post or turning it into like a replay that people can download, turning it into social posts for those individuals, like that's been a big one. Taking some of our like sales feedback and product feedback has been really good as well. Is like we have our product team and they're using, they have like a designer right behind the scenes who's creating things for the product. Well, we know, I'll look at something like, oh my God, this is so good. All right, well, how do we now take that and then use it on like a features page or use it in an asset that we have? So there's kind of been a mix, but I really think that, you know, the social piece of seeing what resonates has just been really interesting to me because it's such a different angle that I never took before.
Yeah, and it really makes sense to go and look at those metrics. And, you know, whenever you're doing a content audit, I always preach, always look at the social metrics. Even though this is a content audit, you're looking at the SEO metrics, look at the social ones too, because that can really dictate what's performing well. And even though it may not match your revenue KPIs, it could dictate future strategies that could get you to that revenue KPI and eventually accomplishing that. So it definitely makes a lot of sense to look at it from a social angle. What if you don't have a Larry Kim though, and you're social?
That's a good point.
Struggling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who is the influencer in your space, right? Who's an influence? Like, who are the other influencers in your space that you can take a look and see? Oh wow, like this got a ton of shares. Oh wow, this got a lot of comments. You know, you can take that same angle to look at that. I mean, that's one thing. Like, I spend a lot. As I'm learning about new products, like it's, whether you're an agency or coming into an organization, like you have to learn about a business really quickly. And that means understanding not just your own site, but understanding the competitive landscape, like you and I kind of touched on earlier. So that means, like, to me, I'm looking to see, like, what are people talking about? Like, not just on the competitive sites, but like, yeah, like I'll use an example, like, you know, SendLane is like an ESP service, right? Like they do kind of like a MailChimp or something. Their founder, Jimmy Kim, like his social is unbelievable. Like he's out there, he's talking, like his messages seem to resonate, like he's very active. So like if I'm in the space, I'm going to go look and see, oh, what was he talking about here? Because people seem to really love that. And that can then give me some ideas too. Yeah.
That's a really great approach. And even if you don't have that influencer to start with, you can take the topic ideas that are clearly doing really well, minus where, you know, he's getting an audience because of who he is or who they are.
Right.
But you can definitely see an increase even just on social when webinars are shared or liked or commented and what people are excited about, and doing the manual work of going in and reading and getting a real pulse on things.
Yeah.
I love that approach.
Yeah. There's also like, I still use like, you know, going back to like the tools side of things, like I'm still a big fan of BuzzSumo, like from an influencer perspective, right? Like their topics, like you go and see what people are talking about. You can see who's talking about it. Like I still think their tool is phenomenal, like especially for informing content ideas, seeing what people are talking about, seeing who those influencers are. Like, love it. Still one of my faves.
Yeah, BuzzSumo is definitely fantastic. As we wrap up, it is secret sauce time. So if you could choose one strategy, one tool, one bit of resource that you are absolutely in love with and putting that sauce on all of your strategy right now, what would that mean?
I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm going to put GPT out there. I know. But again, just going back to, because I think the idea of GPT, I'm just using GPT because that's the one I use, right? But any of these tools, like it just helps you move faster. But it doesn't take away from your expertise. And I think that's really the key, right? The key is using it as a resource, just like we have every other tool, is using it as a resource, not relying on it 100%. Using it to help you, using it to like not just inform your strategy, but like help you do things quicker. So I think that's the angle. It's not like, oh, like go use this and do it for everything. Definitely don't.
Yeah, definitely don't. And I mean, I keep seeing, especially on LinkedIn, everyone's talking about ChatGPT and like use it as a resource, like you said. But it's like, okay, what does that actually mean? In this episode alone, you gave so many great, specific, concrete examples of how you can go in and actually use it as a resource. I like to think of it as a coworker, where
I love that.
Another, like, it's my coworker. I can bounce off ideas and it will tell me, like, maybe you should add this component to the piece of content. It's like, oh, yeah, I didn't even think of that. A lot of those like traditional 101 marketing tactics, ChatGPT is grandfathered into that. Like, that is where it shines. And so we try to do, like, what's new and innovative? And it's like, don't forget about this. This actually works.
Yeah. And like, the funny thing is, like, it's not, I don't even know if it's like that, right? It's not even that innovative. It's just like, oh, wow, if you use this right, it works.
Yes. And using it right is key. Like, you need to throw in a please and a thank you every once in a while. I do get better results with my prompts.
I'll be like, good morning.
Yeah. Top of the morning to you, ChatGPT.
Thank you.
On that note, we will wrap up. Thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate everything you shared.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.